I'm Mike.
I'm Sam. Let's get into it.
It's true. But by the way, I'm first time here and I'm nervous and I'm scared because my headphones don't fit on my ears and my head. Like I was like, but I hope so. If I broke it, I'll buy a new one. I promise.
Welcome to episode 39. I know it's been a while. Michael's on vacation. I'm moving into school again, and with college starting up, so we've been busy the past couple weeks, but we're back with our podcast. So obviously we have some NBA playoffs starting right now. Game ones have been yesterday, the day before, and we're going to start with college football, which it's some old news, but still very relevant because it's just more and more developments every day. So obviously last week or the week before, the Big 10 and the Pac-12 canceled their football seasons, with the Pac-12 just canceling all fall sports for the year, and the Big 10 saying we're going to kind of reevaluate this in this springtime. But then we have the ACC, the SEC, and the Big 12 saying, no, we're not canceling. We're going full steam ahead. So what are your thoughts on two conferences canceling the season, but three of the Power Five continuing their season?
First and foremost, I think it's really interesting that the college football world, in terms of the division, the different commissioners for the Big Ten, the SEC, I think it's really interesting that they're not united in this fight, that they're really divided in what they want to do. Now, I think I want to get into the Big Ten and the schools that are in the divisions that are trying to gear the football program and the season towards the spring, because I think that's very interesting. Just because, how many guys are going to end up opting out? Because I'm thinking like it's even so much football for players who play in the fall. They have really deep playoff runs. They play until the New Year's, and then bam, a couple weeks later, you're training for the NFL scouting combine. You're training for senior day. You're training for your pro day. So I just think it's really difficult for guys to play an entire season in the spring and then end up, what would the NFL combine be, a couple weeks later? And then you jump right into rookie training camp. That is so much wear and tear on your body. That's just so much football to be played within a year time span, to the point where, yeah, guys are going to be playing 20 or so games in 1 year. Obviously, you're going to be playing around 11 college football games and then around 8 to 9 NFL games in a span of a year. So I think that would just be really difficult on players. And I think we'll see a lot of rookies end up getting hurt because of it if that ends up happening.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing for me is you can't play. Football is the most physically demanding sport probably in the world. Obviously there's probably some more like lesser known sports that are very physically demanding, but obviously football is so physically demanding. And if you play an intense college football game, which if you're like Ohio State, if you're like Michigan State, who can play in bowl games, you're going to be playing 13 games, 14 games, maybe in 15 if you're playing for the national championship. That takes a really long toll on your body. And then if you cut that healing time in half to 3 months with kind of like April, or if May, June, July, if you have that's where you start healing, that you're going to, yeah, like you said, you're going to get hurt in the NFL. We're going to have some rookies kind of just their bodies just degrading right off the bat. We talk about how running backs get, when they reach the age of 30, they're so worn out that they start declining. But
Yeah.
I think we can have college running backs start declining even earlier at ages like 25, 26, because there's just that small amount of kind of time off is just really bad for their bodies. We talk about coronavirus being a safety concern, but like you said, playing 20 football games in 1 year is going to be an even more extreme safety concern for these players.
Yeah, I agree completely. And when you look at some sports like mixed martial arts, boxing, even at the pro level, for UFC fighters, for all these different boxing federations across the world, even your top athletes, you can argue that the match is more physically demanding, but these guys fight once or twice every single year. So the recovery time for these fighters are multiple months, because they're just taking a beating for 15 minutes in one night, and then they rest for months and months on end. But with the NFL, you are basically getting into a car accident level of hitting on your brain and just on your body each and every single day. That's why I think NFL players around the entire league hate padded practices, because they're hitting each other so hard in practice just to be hit even more harder in games. So I mean, it's really difficult with NFL players. I know they just started playing padded practices. So, I mean, it starts this early. And just to have a college football season and in relative to right now, a couple months or even just around now, if, the Big Ten goes ahead with a spring college football season. So, I mean, I just think it would be really difficult on the players.
Yeah, like just right off the bat, they play a spring season. Justin Fields will opt out most definitely. Micah Parsons on Penn State, who's probably the best linebacker in the whole country, he already opted out, even if there was going to be a fall season. So without a doubt, he'd be opting out in the spring. I think a lot of these guys who have NFL dreams are going to be opting out. Obviously, players that are going to be like not in the NFL or fringe practice squad players or just a lawyer or an accountant after they play football, they're going to play the season because it's just kind of all they have. But these main stars, the people that fill the stadiums, the people that win you national championships are not going to be playing, which is going to take a major hit to kind of the level of competition within the Big Ten. Because some people are like, oh, Big Ten is they're up there with the SEC with the best football in the nation, but when your best players aren't there, people are going to start watching the ACC more. They're going to start watching the Big 12 more, and then really going to take a hit for the Big Ten. I just think I just think that this is more of a financial decision for these two conferences rather than kind of continuing to play football. I think that they could have kind of found a dorm, some sort of built a dorm quickly or built a building and have the players just stay in there and then just have them quarantine there and have the season continue because that's how you can, like, sort of a small bubble like the NBA and the NHL are doing.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And as much as I hate to say this as a college football fan, I actually commend leagues like, or just divisions like the Big Ten for actually looking at the fall season and saying, well, with the resources we have and the little time we have, it's not practical to go ahead with a fall season. So we're going to just kind of allocate all of our resources and time and money into having a very successful COVID-free spring league season, which, again, like, I commend them for that. But I think it's going to be really interesting and a really interesting case study to see how well the SEC and other divisions that are playing in the fall do, because I think it's going to be a bad look for the Big Ten if other conferences go ahead, have a fall season and a very successful fall season, because it's going to be like, why couldn't you guys do that? But vice versa, where if the SEC really falls apart in their fall season only happens for 2 weeks and then they just have to cancel it entirely, and at that point they're not even prepared for a spring semester for football when, again, they put all their time, effort, and money into the fall. I mean, it's going to be a really bad look for them. So I think that's why I opened this up with saying I'm so surprised they're so divided on this, because I feel like for college football, it would be better if they all fell or they all succeeded, but it can't be both, in my opinion.
Yeah, no offense, but this might come across a little offensive, but obviously like the Big Ten and the Pac-12, you have very, very good schools. No offense to someone that goes to Alabama or some of these Southern schools. Just football and athletics mean much more than kind of academics and kind of these smarter schools like Stanford and Michigan and Ohio State and UCLA. They kind of say that it's just not safe for us to play, but just these Southern schools, football just means a lot more to them. I mean, a lot of these Southern schools don't have NFL teams. They don't have kind of NBA teams, NHL teams. So college football is kind of their main like their heart is all in college football. Like me and you, we love other sports, but kind of these guys are just blue bloods for college football, and they want to see a season be played. And I mean, I think it really just comes down to paying the athletes, because I think if these athletes were paid, it would be a lot more easier to have a season, because these are college players, college students, they're amateur athletes, they're not getting paid. If they don't have the incentive of being paid, they're not going to want to stay in a potential bubble. If they did have that, they're going to want to go out, hang out with friends, and do things that kids want to do when they're in college. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, that's absolutely true. I think that we could be seeing a universal fall football season for all of college football again if athletes were paid. I think that's a really good point, and that's something we can get into. But I mean, just looking at the college football season this year, I'm just going to be really interested to see, like the programs that stuck in. Sadly, they're the programs that, again, are in the South and where COVID is worse. That's the worst part about it. Like you have your Penn States, you have your Ohio States, where obviously COVID is rampant across the entire country, but in small pockets in Ohio, in Pennsylvania, it's not as bad as some states such as Florida, some states such as Texas, where there's even more outbreaks than there was at the start of COVID. So it's really interesting to see, not only are these SEC programs who really financially lean more on football than the Big Ten, for example, we keep using those two conferences. I think they're just really good examples because, again, they're kind of countering where, yes, both have very good football programs, but some have better college basketball programs. I think the Big Ten probably has a better college basketball resume than the SEC does at this point, and they definitely have a better academic resume as well. So, again, looking at these programs, it's really evident to see which programs stuck in and which programs stuck out. And even some programs who, at the start, where it looked like college football season was going to be played as normal, you had your UConns, you had your UMasses independently dropping out because, I mean, obviously these programs suck at football, but they have bigger fish to, grab in this kind of whole scheme of the financial game of college.
Yeah, it's like coming back to the Ivy League. They canceled their season so early just because
Yeah.
football doesn't matter for them as much as it does for these other schools. I mean, they're Ivy League. They're going to make money strictly based off their academics. Football is just kind of a side hustle for them. But kind of two main players in college football, you had Justin Fields and Trevor Lawrence. Or I mean, a lot of players for that fact. When they canceled the season, it was trending on Twitter with hashtag We Want to Play. So these athletes they worked so hard. They want to play these seasons. Like I was surprised how many like kind of high world classing top prospects for the NFL really wanted to play this season. I thought they were just gonna majority of them were just gonna sit out and opt out. But I mean, Justin Fields created that petition, which I think it had over 200,000 signees on it, and within like 3 days to play. Trevor Lawrence, he went on a Twitter rant saying like, if the season's canceled, they're going to go home and they're going to be in less kind of safer environments because they're not going to be tested every day. They're not going to be around people wearing masks. They're going to be home with their friends in environments where they can contract the virus probably more frequently or higher risk for them getting the virus rather than if they were on a college campus and they're being watched over by hawks like these coaches.
Yeah, it's a really good point, and I think it's really interesting that the two main proprietors, I should say, for the college football season is its two biggest stars really going into the season with quarterback Justin Fields and quarterback Trevor Lawrence, again, and the two biggest NFL prospects as well. So I do think that's really interesting where these guys are going to be the least affected if the college football season doesn't happen. And it's really just great to see that the people that are least affected by something care about it the most because they're in the position of power to care about it the most. So again, I think that's really awesome for guys like Trevor Lawrence, guys like Justin Fields. I really think that shows great leadership quality to not right away just declare, oh, I'm going to be foregoing the season to prepare for the NFL draft because they could really do that. They could kind of pull Nick Bosa in a sense and kind of leave their teammates in the dust a little bit and just kind of be more self-interested and just go ahead with the NFL season and prepare for that. And I wouldn't go against any guy doing that. I would actually commend anybody doing that because I think that's a smart thing to do. But again, I think that just shows some rare leadership qualities from the two best quarterbacks in college football right now to kind of go ahead and do that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it really kind of, in a sense, boosts their prospect rating a lot because these guys are still rallying the troops and it also just shows how important college football is or college athletics are to some people. You saw, was it 69 NFL players opting out, but then these stars in college football are imploring for a season to be played while the NFL, a lot of players are not even playing in the NFL this year. But it's just really, really interesting to see. I mean, I don't know what to do. They have 3 of the 5 Power 5 conferences. I don't know if they're still going to do a national championship within kind of. I don't know if they're still going to have an AP poll or just conference championships for that matter. I don't know how it's going to be down the road in December and January.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. You just brought up a great point where there's more NFL players that opted out than college football players at this point, I believe. And I mean, we have to think about the body of college football players compared to the NFL. I mean, it dormits the NFL in terms of, I mean, there's just so many college football players, so many programs. There's only 32 NFL teams, 53 guys that make each roster. If you do the math on that, that's not even close. That's not even a fraction of how many college football players are. And I think that has to do with not only the level of skill that it takes to be in the NFL, but I think that with every single sport, you have baseball, for example, so many people play t-ball, little league, and then even less people play high school, and then even less people play college, and even less people play pros. Not only because obviously the skill gap and the skill it takes to make it that big, but I think once you go through each level of sport, the passion kind of decreases for a lot of guys. I think it either increases as you go up or it decreases. So I think that's why I think a lot of NFL players who are retired have came out and said, I lost passion for the game once I got to the NFL level. And for me, it was just a job. And I do think for a lot of NFL guys, that football is just a job for them and it's not a passion. They don't love it, sadly. But I do think in the college football world, there's much less people like that where they just play football because they love it. And obviously they don't get paid, so they have to love it.
Yeah, I think they love football and they're hungry to get to the NFL. And then kind of once they get to the NFL, that's when they start getting paid and they're kind of I think the money plays a bigger factor in with versus the passion. But yeah, I'm just
Certainly.
curious to see. I think obviously the ACC, the hands down favorite to win the conference is probably Clemson, but they do have Notre Dame in their conference this year. So that I'm interested to see if we're going to see a nice Notre Dame Clemson ACC championship. And then obviously I think for the SEC, even though Bama was a little bit down that last year, I think they're the favorites to win the SEC. I mean, Florida has been gaining some prospects.
Yeah.
They can rival them, but looking at someone like LSU, I think they lost a lot because even LSU they lost a lot in the draft. But we're talking about players that are opting out. I think a couple of LSU's returning starters opted out this year, so LSU has 20 of 22 starters gone for this year. So I mean, it's gonna be really tough for Coach O because he's pretty much starting from fresh for his starting lineup. And then I think
Yeah.
for the Big 12, obviously, I think Oklahoma's the hands down favorite for that as well.
Yeah, it's going to be really tough for LSU. I believe they're losing their offensive coordinator as well, which is going to be really tough for them. I mean, that's really going to be a testament to Coach O. Touching upon Florida a little bit, I think they're one of those teams where they're a hype monster every single year. I think they're one of those teams where I'll see it, or I'll believe it when I see it. So I think they have a lot of young prospects, a lot of freshmen, maybe redshirt sophomores, redshirt freshmen who are really good prospects, who are 5 to 4 star prospects. But are they going to take a step up? Alabama, of course, is competitive every year. And then you talked about Notre Dame. Alabama, I mean, we see them in so many competitive football games each and every single year. But looking at a just great program with a great history like Notre Dame, who, in my opinion, hasn't played in too many meaningful games the last couple of seasons, I would really like to see them compete for a divisional title that they haven't in such a long time.
Yeah, I mean, ACC obviously it's not the main. Everybody talks about how it's kind of a cupcake conference, but I'm curious to see if Notre Dame is placed in a conference with more competition because if you look at their schedule from when they're independents, they're not playing like the best schools each week. But if they're playing like kind of solidified programs like Clemson, North Carolina is kind of coming up a little bit. You have Virginia Tech, who's good. Playing teams like that, I wonder how they're going to stack up against them.
Yeah, certainly. I think this season could do absolute wonders for Notre Dame football because they're a program where they could survive as an independent because, again, they're such a historic franchise, or I guess we should say program in this case. But again, they could schedule these games, but in doing so, I think they've kind of lost a bit of their legacy and ranking in the college football world, playing lesser opponents every single year. So if in conference they could do really, really well this year, even potentially take down Clemson, I don't foresee that happening. But if that does happen, then I think that opens up a whole world of scheduling tougher games, even if they choose to be an independent again after this season. I just think that would be a really great opportunity for Notre Dame football.
Yeah, I think being an independent is very hard for a program like Notre Dame because I mean every year when if they're in the top five, people are just really skeptical to put them inside the college football playoff because they're not playing a conference championship every year. They're not playing these harder programs. But moving on to the NBA, we had game ones for the first round, the opening round of the NBA playoffs on Monday, and I mean we had some great games on Monday. We had games 2 starting today, also or yesterday, and we have more today. So, looking at this first round, what are your initial thoughts on these series?
I think first and foremost we have to talk about the one seeds. I think we have to talk about the Bucks and the Lakers losing, and not only losing like in a the Raptors lost last year. I believe the first game as the 1 or 2 seed against the Magic. Oh my gosh, like was kind of a fluky game. I don't even think those losses were those types of losses. I think they were very revealing losses. I guess we can get into the Bucks first, where their defensive, I don't know how Mike Budenholzer won Coach of the Year. I think that's a bit of a joke. He has a very good team. He had a very good scheme in the regular season, but postseason, I just see offensively and defensively, I think their game plan is shit, to be quite honest with you. They have a defensive philosophy of protect the paint, be a great paint team, and then let the other team shoot threes. And I mean, in today's modern NBA, that just doesn't make sense. And that's what happened with the Magic. You had your second best scorer on the Magic, Evan Fournier, not score until what the midway through the fourth quarter. I mean, he had a terrible game, and the Magic still won pretty well that game. So I just think for the Bucks, they need to switch up their game plan very fast.
Yeah, I think like what you said with them protecting the paint and not protecting the perimeter, which is just an extremely dumb game plan. I mean, that would work in the 1980s if you were playing against the Showtime Lakers, but when you're playing against a team, I mean, just any team in the NBA right now, where everybody shoots three at a significant amount over where when they're driving to the paint, that's gonna hurt you in the long run. But the Magic, I think what really helps them is obviously Nikola Vucevic is a really great player, and he had 35, so he came up big in a very important series for them because they are the 8th seed, so they're not favored at all because obviously they're playing Giannis, who is probably going to be MVP. But I think the Magic just play really, really great as a unit. If you look at the stats for this team, I mean, they had 6 players over double digits, and just everybody's contributing. There's no odd man out. We'll talk about this series later, but the Lakers, I mean, their starters and their key players that got significant minutes did not step up at all, but the players on the Magic all throughout the roster played really great, and I think that's going to struggle that's how the Bucks are going to struggle in this series if they don't have kind of other players stepping up, while the Magic do have a lot of players stepping up in big roles.
Yes, certainly, and it's really interesting because the Orlando Magic statistically, they aren't even in the top half of three-point shooting in terms of volume, and I don't even think in terms of percentage. So, I mean, this is a team who actually relied heavily on the mid-range shot in the regular season and even in the playoff game. I mean, you had Markelle Fultz hitting some mid-rangers. You, of course, had Vucevic hitting some mid-rangers. You had Terrence Ross hitting mid-range shots. Again, they're missing Aaron Gordon as well, who I think at sometimes could be a negative, but again, he's a really good player, so they're even missing that guy, and they just couldn't. Their defensive philosophy was protect the paint, and they couldn't even protect the paint too well, which I don't anticipating happening going forward. But even if you protect the paint really well and you kind of dare guys to shoot threes, maybe it works against a team like the Lakers. But I mean, once you start playing some of the better three-point shooting teams in the NBA, once you start playing guys like Jason Tatum on the Celtics, once you start playing guys like I mean, even the Toronto Raptors don't have great three-point shooters, but they just spread the ball around so well to the point where they're going to get a lot of open three-point shots against the Bucks. So I'm really worried about the Bucks, and I don't remember in NBA history watching the 2-1 seeds their first game and saying, "Wow, these teams are very beatable."
Yeah, before we get into the Lakers series, I'll just say one more thing about the Bucks is, I mean, looking at their roster, there's just a lot of duds being thrown up. I mean, Brooke Lopez, 30 minutes, 5 points. I mean, Chris
Yeah,
Middleton, he did score 13, but he's playing 31 minutes. He's supposed to be your second best player, and he's only scoring 14. That's not how you're going to win an NBA championship. That's not how you're going to win just a series in the playoffs, frankly. I mean, Dante DiVincenzo, 13 minutes, 2 points. I mean, there's like the Lakers, there's just a lot of duds on this roster when they're thrown into the game. And also Pat Connaughton getting 22 minutes with only 3 points too.
yeah. I mean, he's a guy he shouldn't get playoff minutes. Kyle Korver, he shouldn't be getting playoff minutes anymore. I mean, you have Kyle Korver and George Hill, the LeBron James rejects, who played absolutely horrible the last time they're in the playoffs. And I mean, I don't understand how you can anticipate them doing good in the playoffs. I mean, you have guys like that getting minutes. You have Eric Bledsoe, who, could we be honest here? I mean, he's a good regular season player, but time and time and time after again, he's proven to be a below average starter in the playoffs. And I mean, he's going to be that again. So, I mean, looking at the Bucks roster, even Brooke Lopez wasn't playing too well. He was kind of resorting back to his old ways where wasn't playing like a stretch five, certainly in game one. So, I mean, it's going to be really interesting for the Bucks. That's another team where I see them like the Lakers, where they shoot threes, but their three-point shooters are very volatile because these are guys that aren't that good of three-point shooters. So, I mean, when they miss, it's like, how could you be surprised, I guess?
Yeah, I memean, they constantly shoot the three. I mean, but if you don't have players that are shooting at a high percentage, it's going to really just hurt your team because if you if the Magic go down the court, score a basket, 2 points, and you just go down the court, chuck up a three, miss it, and then that's just going to hurt you in the long run because if you're just constantly missing shots and they're going back down the court and scoring every time, it's just you can't win a basketball game that way.
Yeah, no, certainly. And getting into the Lakers series a little bit, at the point where I'm at with the Lakers is during the offseason. Again, I think we can make a video about this, but I think since around 2014, 2013, the Lakers have been one of the worst run organizations in all of basketball. I think their front office decisions have just been horrid time and time and time after again with Magic Johnson, with Jeannie Buss, with Rob Pelinka. I think they've all just been terrible. I think it even hurt Magic Johnson's legacy a little bit, just kind of bailing on the Lakers organization the way he did. But again, I'm at the point with the Lakers where if your name is not LeBron James and Anthony Davis and you're on the 2021 roster, I, I'm going to struggle to watch this team because I think every single player should be gone. I think every single player is not a championship caliber player on the Lakers right now. I would be surprised if they even made it past the third round. I mean, at this point with the Lakers, I'd be floored if they made it to the finals, to be completely honest with you.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the score, it was 100 to 93. Like the Blazers didn't play that great.
Yeah.
The Lakers just sucked. Really, really, they just sucked a lot that game. I mean, LeBron played great. I mean, he was the first player in NBA history to have over 20 points, over 20 assists, and over 20 rebounds, and then Anthony Davis getting a double double. But just outside of those two players, there's just no scoring. Obviously, Kyle Kuzma, he did score 14 points, but and like we said for Chris Middleton, he had 14 points in 30 minutes. It's just those are kind of empty points when he's getting such significant time and he's bricking a lot of shots while he's playing, but he still managed to get 14. I think that's kind of a deceptive stat line for him. But yeah, there's just no support for Anthony Davis and LeBron James. I think
Yeah, no,
I'm sorry. I think they're really missing Rondo as kind of a contributor to get people more open, and obviously Avery Bradley, who's really good at defense. I think moving into the offseason, they keep LeBron and AD, like you said, but I think like you said, they need to kind of blow up this whole team, this whole core. And I think they should keep Avery Bradley as well. I think he's a really, really solid NBA player. But yeah, this team is a dumpster fire. I don't know how they managed to get to the 1 seed in the Western Conference.
I mean, every single game, I watched so many Lakers games. I would say I watched about 75% of Lakers games, and I mean, they were always just so unimpressive to me. They were always like limp to the finish line. They would always cross the finish line first, but they would limp to the finish line. And I even think that game one against the Blazers, I think both teams limped to the finish line. Again, to hold a team like the Blazers, who have been just absolutely red hot, to around 100 points, and you're not able to win still. I mean, that's really telling. So, I mean, again, this is a Lakers team. I look at Danny Green. He's not the shooter he once was. People have a very clouded judgment of, oh, on the San Antonio Spurs, he was setting records in the finals for 3 points made. He was just this great 3-and-D shooter on the San Antonio Spurs. And then come to the Rockets. I mean, people are forgetting about Danny Green's finals performances. He would shoot 2 for 8 from 3. He would shoot 1 for 7. And then he would have a game shooting 5 for 10 from 3. And that's a player where, I mean, his lows are just as bad as his highs, if not worse. So with Danny Green, he's not that good of a 3-point shooter anymore. Kyle Kuzma, I mean, 3 out of the 4 years he's played basketball, he's been a horrible 3-point shooter. He was good his rookie year, but that's an outlier. If you're good 1 out of 4 years at something, that's an outlier, not a trend. So looking at KCP, I think he was like 0 for 9 that game on shooting. He just sucks, to be completely honest with you. I mean, Alex Caruso, I love Alex Caruso, but he's a borderline G League player, and he gets 30 minutes. I mean, I think there was one possession down, I think it was like 3 minutes or 2 minutes left in the entire game, and you had Alex Caruso, this guy who has never played significant playoff minutes in his life. Again, he's a G League level player, in my opinion, and you have him dribbling around the shot clock and taking a horrible 3 with about 6 seconds left in the shot clock. I mean, that just shows the inexperience that he has on an NBA playoff level, and you can't even blame him for that. You have to blame the coaching staff for putting him in that position. And I'll end this thought with saying about LeBron James. He does the right basketball decision every single time he has the ball. He had 10 assists by the halftime, and he probably should have had 20 assists by halftime. I mean, that's how many open looks he was giving his teammates, but I'm at the point with LeBron where your teammates suck. You need to realize the writing on the wall. Your teammates suck. They're not going to be making open shots. And again, I know LeBron James makes the right basketball play every single play, but he needs to stop being passive. I can't look at a guy like Luka Doncic, a guy like James Harden, a guy like Damian Lillard, who he's playing, who they don't make the best basketball play every single play, but they're putting up more points and they're willing their teams to wins to the point where LeBron James, you got to stop being selfless. I'd rather LeBron James shoot the Lakers out of a game, LeBron James be the reason the team loses rather than all the other pieces around LeBron James, because they're obviously going to lose if LeBron keeps deferring to his teammates. LeBron just needs to be a ball hog. He needs to stop passing as much, and he just needs to score the basketball more.
Yeah, I think LeBron needs to play with pure aggression because he's just being let down by his teammates. So he needs to put the ball in his hands, and obviously Anthony Davis as well. Anthony Davis and LeBron just really need to take over and kind of look past their own teammates and just focus on themselves and playing kind of basically like 2v5 basketball if they want to win this game coming up. I do think that they might come out a lot more aggressive this game than they did game one, because they did play great on defense, but just offense, they just came out very, very short. So I think that LeBron will come out very aggressive because, I mean, LeBron on the Cavaliers, a lot of those final games that they if you look at the Warriors series when they came back from 3-1, LeBron came out so aggressive in so many of those games. And then if you look at the year prior when they lost the finals, he didn't come out aggressive some games, which kind of hurt them. They could have stolen some games from the Warriors in 2015, but they did lose some because LeBron was kind of trying to get more teammates involved rather than getting the ball in the basket for himself.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. And for LeBron James, I'd rather him put up 40 points and 0 assists and lose rather than put up, 23 points, 17 assists and lose, because he just needs to be more tenacious. He needs to score the basketball more. I mean, he's a guy who has been a steady 25-point per game if not more, score throughout his entire career. He's one of the greatest scorers of all time. He's third in points ever. I think he's first in total points in terms of playoff points and regular season points. So for a guy like that to defer to his teammates more often than not, we always say about LeBron James, he's the greatest pass first scoring player of all time, which is absolutely true. But at this point in his career, I know he likes to pass more than he shoots. I mean, that's evident in his stat line and how he played this season. He led the league in assists this season. But again, he just needs to, come playoff time, you have not one really good three-point shooter on your team. You don't have a Duncan Robinson who went, 7 for 8 today and 1 for the Heat. You don't have a Klay Thompson. You don't even have a guy like J.J. Redick. You don't have any guy that could shoot consistently 40% from the field on three-point shots. You have Anthony Davis, who historically hasn't even shot threes before he joined the Lakers. So for the LA Lakers to really rely upon those guys to play big minutes and make big shots, I think it's just unrealistic. I think for Frank Vogel tonight, you're going to see more of a change in terms of rotation. I would be surprised if Alex Caruso plays 30 minutes. I would be surprised if Dion Waiters plays 1 minute like he did in the game one. I would even, at this point, I'm not even mad if J.R. Smith plays. And you know how I feel about J.R. Smith playing NBA minutes at this point in his career.
My dude. I love J.R. Smith. No.
Yeah, no, I love Henny God, but at this point, yeah, I wouldn't even be mad about J.R. Smith playing because at least he can just make some three-point shots.
Yeah, I don't think LeBron's going to see the bench this game. I think he's going to play probably the full game. Anthony Davis too, probably. But these two, they need to step up. LeBron needs to kind of play me basketball, not team basketball. I think that's how they're going to win this series. But I do think, if I was a betting man, I think the Lakers would come away. I think they're going to come away with the victory in this game. What do you think about that? Do you think they're going to win or lose?
I don't want to bet against LeBron, but I'm going to say they lose tonight. I think they go down 0-2. I really do believe that. I just believe once LeBron needs to show me that killer mentality that he's had throughout his career and that he's lacked throughout his career, quite honestly. So he needs to show me that killer mentality. He needs to go out. He needs to score 15 to 20 points in the first quarter. If LeBron James, even if they're losing going into the second quarter, if he has 15 points in the first quarter, I would change my prediction in a heartbeat, and I would say the Lakers will win. But even if, let's say it's tight, and in the first quarter, the Lakers are winning by something like 5 points, but LeBron James only has 6 points, I'm going to say that the Trailblazers are going to lose just because in the fourth quarter, LeBron, if he's not going to get you 20 points, if he's not going to have that killer mentality, they're going to lose because the Lakers don't have guys who are going to hit big shots going just down to the final stretch, and that's been the problem for the one-seeded Bucks, and that's going to be the problem for the one-seed Lakers.
Yeah, definitely. 9 o'clock, we'll be glued to the TV ready to watch this game. But another series that I want to talk about is kind of a really interesting one, the Mavericks Clippers, where they split the first two games. Game one, I think the Mavericks could have won that game. Obviously, Kristaps Porzingis was thrown out for double technicals, which very, very kind of up in the air where if he should have been thrown out or not. But game two, the Mavericks just flat out outplayed the Clippers. I mean, they were moving the ball around well. I really was impressed with Seth Curry. He was really he got a lot of hockey assists. He was really opening up the court a lot and finding the open man. And then they were really passing well, which I think that's won the game. The Clippers are always everyone talking about how they're so good at defense, but they were kind of falling apart a lot of the possessions because on different possessions, the Mavericks were making 6-7 passes, and the Clippers were just getting lost in translation.
Yeah, I love what you just opened up with that kind of series recap so far, because that is the number one glaring weakness that nobody talks about the Clippers, and that's team chemistry, and that is who is your primary, just who's going to create for your other teammates, because one, this team hasn't played together a lot. They don't have a lot of chemistry like the Mavericks do, where I know Kristaps Porzingis and Luka Doncic haven't played too much together in terms of other just star duos like Anthony Davis and LeBron James, but the rest of that roster has played so much together throughout the entire season. They're a very cohesive unit, and they have one of the best passers in the league, one of the best distributors, one of the best guys who can get their teammates open in Luka Doncic. But for the Clippers, who do you have to create for your teammates? Lou Will's score first. Pat Beverly's not a good passing point guard. Kawhi Leonard, if you want to point to one weakness in his offensive game, that's seeing the court, that's having court vision, that's finding his open teammates. Paul George is a score first guy. Montrezl Harrell is score first. Zubac, he can't pass out of the post. I mean, you don't have one good passer on this Clippers team. And I think that's been very overlooked for way too long. And I think a light has finally been kind of shown on that because, again, you're going to have a lot of ISO ball with the Clippers. You're going to have a lot of not playing off of each other. And I think that really showed the first two games of this series. And I think that's going to be a problem for them moving forward.
Yeah, I think this is going to come down. I think the Mavericks, they are this, 7th seed? So they're not seeded highly, but I think this is going to come down to Game 7. I think, like you said, the chemistry is really a problem for the Clippers because obviously Lou Will miss the first couple games because he was at a strip club. Even if you go back to the regular season with the load management, I mean, that takes some chemistry away if Kawhi's not playing with your guys every night and kind of building that chemistry. And looking at Paul George, Game 2, what do you have, 14 points? I mean,
Yeah.
The air quotations playoff P is just non-existent sometimes. I don't understand that. I don't understand how he got that nickname when he kind of crumbles under the pressure a lot of the time.
Yeah, I mean, I was just about to say about Paul George. I mean, it's like Eric Bledsoe. How many times are we going to give this guy a pass for underperforming or not even performing at all in the playoffs? I think pre-injury Paul George, number 24 Paul George, and then number 13, PG 13. Those are two completely different playoff players because number 24 Paul George, I mean, he would play better than he would in the regular season, but we saw time and time and time and after again with even in Indiana. I remember his last season in Indiana. I think they were the 8th seed playing the 1-seeded Cavaliers, and everyone was like, oh, potentially, I think this was in 2017, if I'm not mistaken. And I think everybody was kind of hyping Paul George and the Pacers up and saying they could actually give LeBron James and company a lot of troubles because Paul George, he's proven with the Pacers team to be really good against LeBron. And I think they got swept 4-0, and he just played horrible in that series. I mean, just flash forward a year later, and 8th seeded, or I think it was the 6th seeded actually, Indiana Pacers in the first round took LeBron James to 7 games without Paul George. And then, of course, you have his playoff performances with the Thunder for 2 years where they got eliminated in the first round 2 years in a row. And I think Paul George, he had his good games, but he had his very bad games, and his averages were not pretty for sure. And then again, I mean, Game 1, he plays really good, and then Game 2, he lays an absolute dud. And at this point, it's a trend. It's not an outlier. So Paul George, expect him to have more games like this where he plays really bad in playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, Kawhi, 35 points. So Kawhi is a solidified playoff all-star. I mean, he's in the playoffs, he's going to compete and just play really hard, and it's going to be hard for anyone to stop him. But I think the dark horse for the Mavericks is Boban because Zubac is the starting center for the Clippers, and I don't know if he clears 7 feet. He might be like 6'11" or just barely over 7 feet. And if you watch the highlights, if you watch the game, they were feeding Boban. He had a pretty great game because he was just having easy finishes around the rim because no one was just contesting his shot because he's just so tall.
Yeah, Zubac, even if he is a 7-footer, I think he's a bit soft. Now, I think that was one of the moves by the LA Lakers where it was an absolute mistake getting rid of him for basically cash considerations, trading or letting him go to a rival and him being the starting center on a rival. So I think that was another bad move by the Lakers that they've done the past couple seasons. But again, Zubac, I mean, he can't match with guys like Boban. He can't even match with guys like JaVale McGee, in my opinion. But I think it's going to be really interesting kind of projecting going forward. I think I want to touch upon this with the Lakers a little bit. How are they going to project against a team whose biggest player is 6'7"? Because I think at this point with the Rockets, I do anticipate the Rockets squeaking out and just kind of getting out of the first round against the Thunder. I think it will be a close series, but again, with the Rockets, this is no hyperbole. They shot 53s in game one. And you have a Lakers team who shot, 0 for 9, 0 for 8 in the first quarter from three. And then the rest of the game, they shot something like 16%, 20% from three. So you have a team like that playing a team like the Rockets who are going to be putting up a layup or a three-point shot virtually every single possession. I just don't understand how the Lakers could match up with a team like that. And I think the Rockets are going to be the worst matchup nightmare for multiple teams, such as the Clippers and such as the Lakers.
Yeah, because I mean, they're just classic D'Antoni offense, run and gun. They're just when you play the Rockets, it's a track meet. They're just so fast flying down the court. Obviously, James Harden isn't kind of like the fastest player with the ball. He's kind of like poetry in motion, but he can
Yeah.
score the ball so well. I mean, he's one of the best pure scorers in NBA history. I mean, it's hard to stop him. But looking at the other roster, I mean, Russell Wilson, not the Seattle Seahawks, but Russell Westbrook is a freight train coming down the lane, and he flies with the ball. So these Rockets are just so quick, and it's really hard to contain them if you're kind of a slow motion team on defense.
Yeah, certainly. And I mean, it's going to get to the point where are you even going to play JaVale McGee minutes? Are you even going to play Dwight Howard minutes? Because at that point, I mean, they're not these great offensive players. They're not these players who could take advantage of the Rockets defense because the Rockets defense has proven that these great big men defenders, these great big men centers like Rudy Gobert, I mean, they're not that valuable because the Rockets have a system where they're so fast in playing rotational defense. Every single time there's a mismatch on the block. I mean, we saw this game one with Steven Adams. They just double team Steven Adams, and that's even better than Steven Adams going against a guy one-on-one like Rudy Gobert. It's even more effective than guarding him with another center because they double team him. They have to pass out of the double team. By the time they pass out of the double team, they're so disciplined defensively that that guy who was once open, he's not even open anymore. So more so than the Rockets' offense being impressive, I think their defense is the most fascinating defense I've ever seen in my entire life for any sport. And I'm really interested to see what this defense is going to be able to do going forward because they've really, really impressed me.
Yeah. So before we end off this episode, you want to go through every series and kind of predict who's going to win and who's not going to win?
Yeah, sure. So I guess we should go ahead and go first Eastern Conference. 1 seed versus 8 seed. Obviously, that would be the Magic. Sorry, the Magic against the Bucks. I do think the Magic are not going to end up winning this series. I think they could take potentially one more game. So I think the Bucks could win in 6 games.
Yeah, I was going to completely agree. I think I was going to say it's going to be the Bucks are going to win, but there's going to be some tough grind out victories, and I do see the Bucks winning in 6 games, and not a lot of people thought it was going to be a 4-game sweep, but I do think the Bucks will win in 6.
Certainly. Then we have Raptors against the Nets. I think that should probably be a 4-0 sweep for the
Yeah,
Raptors.
4 sweep. I mean, the Nets they were pretty impressive.
Yep.
Game 1 and game 2, considering like the limited amount of great basketball players they have on the roster. They're kind of very impressive, and that's like
They are.
an unspoken storyline of the bubble is how good the Nets kind of are performing in some of these games.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, this team, real quick, is geared up to be the best team in the NBA once Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving come back. But getting into some of these matchups, again, Celtics versus 76ers. 76ers look horrible. I mean, I've been saying from the start, have the Bill Belichickian kind of rationale where trade a player 1 to 2 seasons too early rather than trade a player 1 to 2 seasons too late. This is going to be an unpopular opinion. I've been saying since his rookie season, trade him, Joel Embiid. I think they should trade him. That's beyond the point, but I do think the Celtics are going to actually sweep 4-0.
I'm going to give the Celtics the victory, but I'm going to do it a gentleman's sweep. The gentleman's sweep, 5 games to 1, or 4 games to 1. I think that the 76ers are going to able to grab 1 game. But yeah, this core for the 76ers, they do need to blow up either trade Simmons or Embiid. I think Simmons is, despite his poor shooting, I think he's the main guy you keep for your roster and build around him because he is really good on defense. He is good at kind of similar to LeBron James. He's very good at finding the open man, and just his passing is really great. But yeah, Joel Embiid, he's fun to watch, but I just don't think he's kind of a winning caliber player as your number one guy on the team.
Yeah, I would completely agree with that. And a lot of recent rumors have come out specifically surrounding LeBron James' old team, the Cavaliers, and them thinking that they're going to trade for Ben Simmons this offseason. They strongly believe they have a trade package in place to trade for Ben Simmons, which I think that would be really interesting. Let's say a guy like Colin Sexton now is paired up, or even Darius Garland is paired up with Joel Embiid. I think that would be a really good dynamic. So I think I would be really interested to see that, even if I don't think that would be the best move for the 76ers to make. But I believe, if I'm not forgetting one more Eastern Conference playoff matchup, I think the last one would be the Pacers versus the Heat. The Heat won again today, despite Jimmy Butler continuing to struggle from the field. So I do anticipate this going to maybe 5 games, maybe 6 games, but I do think the Pacers are going to pick up 1 to 2 games, but nonetheless, I think the Heat are going to win the series.
Yeah, I think the Pacers are going to get one game, which I do think it's going to be a gentleman's sweep. Because even though Jimmy Butler is kind of lacking in these games, which is shooting, but I mean, someone like Duncan Robinson, who's just has a pure stroke and he's really great on the field. I mean, if Jimmy Butler lacks with his shooting, I think Duncan Robinson makes up for it with Jimmy Butler's poor shooting. So it's a win-win situation. If Jimmy Butler's playing great on defense, great leadership, but he does lack the shooting, I think Duncan helps make up for it.
Yeah, certainly. And now going into the Western Conference, I guess we'll do 1-8 again. The Trailblazers, who probably the best 8 seed of all time, and then you're playing against the Lakers. So, despite me having the Trailblazers going up 2-0 tonight, I do believe that the Lakers are going to find a way to pull out of the series. It's like the Patriots, where I rather be wrong in choosing them winning than me being wrong choosing them losing. And that's kind of what my rationale is with the Lakers and LeBron James here. So I do think the Lakers are going to win, but in 7 games.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a 7-game series. I think this is probably going to be one of the best series in all this year's playoffs. I think it's going to be just back and forth basketball every game.
Yeah, certainly. I would completely agree with that. And now a series that we talked about pretty heavily in this episode, the Clippers versus the Mavericks. I do think the Mavericks, again, I think they're going to give them all they got. But at the end of the day, I do think it's going to be the Clippers with Doc Rivers at the helm who are going to end up winning this series, again, in 7 games, in my
Yeah,
opinion.
I think 7-game series. I think the majority of these Western Conference series are going to be 7-game series. We talked about how the East is probably like sweep, gentleman sweep. I think most of these Western Conference series are going to be long series and very intense basketball because it just shows how deep the West is.
Yeah, certainly. And going on to the next series, we're going to have the Houston Rockets playing the Oklahoma City Thunder real quick. This is that one series I'm like, damn, I wish there was fans. I wish this was playing home and away, because having Russell Westbrook and James Harden playing their old franchise, their beloved franchise with their beloved fans, against Chris Paul playing his old franchise, kind of a lot of animosity with Chris Paul and the Rockets organization. So that's that's one series that I wish was live, with fans attending, of course. But I do think the Rockets are going to win in 6 games.
Yeah, I think Rockets are going to win 6 games. I love the Thunder. I think they're really like a surprise story going into this year's season because everybody kind of wrote them off and people were questioning if they were going to trade Chris Paul at the trade deadline or even earlier than that. But they play as a great unit, but I just don't think they have enough kind of star power to win this series against the Rockets. So I think it's going to be a 6-game series win for the Rockets.
And then I believe, if I'm not forgetting again, last but certainly not least, my surprise, favorite series to watch so far actually has been the Utah Jazz versus the Denver Nuggets, because these are 2 teams who are neck and neck, who look very, very even. Donovan Mitchell, of course, scoring 57 points in the first game. Second game, really just playing great, smart basketball, still having around 30 points, but kind of a bit of a quiet 30. You had Jordan Clarkson playing absolutely phenomenal the first 2 games as well. Another bad Lakers let go, but that's besides the point. I do think this is going to go to 7 games, but I do think the Nuggets are going to come out in 7 games.
I think the Nuggets are going to win 6 games. I think they have a little more scoring ability. And looking at
Yeah.
the Jazz, I think I really just don't like Rudy Gobert. I think he's just kind of a black hole. I think that they need to
Yeah.
trade him in order to kind of take that next step to become a great team in the Western Conference.
Yeah, I completely agree. And real quick with the Nuggets, they have the offensive firepower, I think, to keep up with most, if not every team in the entire league. But it's been really telling and kind of sad to see Michael Porter Jr. absolutely get picked on like Steph Curry level of we're going to screen your guy and we're going to get our best ball handler match up with Michael Porter Jr. every single time down the court if we can. I mean, that's the level of getting picked on Michael Porter Jr. has been on the defensive end. He is one of the worst defenders in all of the playoff basketball, I think, so far, because I just think he lacks the experience and kind of awareness to be a great defender, but he certainly has the physicals to be a really good defender. But having your arguably your best scorer like that, I mean, your top three scorers, I should say, Jamal Murray, Michael Porter Jr., and Nikola Jokic are all bad defenders, to be completely honest with you, so far. So I think that's going to end up hurting them in the second round. But again, in the first round, I think they'll be fine.
Yeah, I completely agree. Well, thank you everybody for watching. We hope you enjoyed our video after quite some time away, but we'll see you in the next one.